welcome everyone. This is a JumpCloud webinar about working with end users, building trust, and overcoming challenges. It's going to be a pretty easy conversation. We're not going to go too technical, or it's just going to be a fun, light conversation about a day in the life. I'm Zach Bauer, former VP of IT and current JumpCloud solution engineer, joined by Nathan Virgin, IT systems analyst and administrator, and James Agri, enterprise collaboration engineer. Why don't you guys introduce yourselves a little bit and give us some background?
Okay, I can go. Nathan Virgin, like Zach said, I work for AkitaBox. I've been with that company for about 3.5 years. We're a SaaS startup in Madison, Wisconsin, based in Madison. We focus on facilities management and optimization. I've been in IT for about 25 years, both in the public and private sectors, working front end all the way to systems administration.
Cool. I'm James Agri. Like Zach mentioned, also been in the industry for quite some time. I've worked at a university, and now I currently work at a SaaS provider called SproutLoud. It's a tech marketing service, or a tech marketing company. And yeah, done help desk, done behind the scenes stuff. So it's it's always been very interesting. So definitely enjoy the industry. It's keeps you on your toes. So
That's great. Thanks, guys. Yeah, and I'm Zach Bauer. I spent 20 years in IT, or a little more. I don't want to date myself there, but I joined JumpCloud in September to join the solution engineering team, and I'm really excited to be a part of this. So today's agenda, we're going to be looking at a few different topics. Navigating difficulties when working with end users. That's always a fun one to kind of deep dive on in a conversation. Hybrid work and workloads, what that looks like and how things changed. And balance satisfaction and building relationships. That's a huge part. You know, what does your internal brand look like, and how do you work on that? And lastly, resources, and we want to get to questions if you guys have anything that you want to add to the webinar. So why talk about end users? You know, that's a big part of the job, right? I mean, you can build a system, but it's got to be built to interact with users. Otherwise, what are we doing? So, you know, it's worthwhile having this conversation to take a look at it from both perspectives, try and understand what the challenges are being an IT admin, working in the industry, and understanding what it looks like from the user perspective, and trying to build a balance on how to get things done and be patient and hear what is needed on the other end, which can be challenging. What's most difficult, and how do you deal with challenges? This is great. This is a great lead off here. Personality types. Who is easier or harder to work with? I think everybody on this panel, guests included, have some strong opinions about this, and so we'll be covering that. Techniques for dealing with challenges. Do you guys do box counting if you're getting stressed out? Certain things can help. Let's talk about that. What has or hasn't worked in the past in stressful scenarios?
oh, sorry. I wasn't sure if we were doing an overview.
Yeah, I thought we were just doing an overview there, but let's go ahead and take these one at a time. So personality types. You know, James, why don't you lead off with who's easier or harder to work with in your opinion?
Sure. I feel like it seems that end users come in, they're like different categories. They're the ones that don't know anything and don't really care. They just want it to work. And then there's some that know just enough to be dangerous, where they'll try to fix it themselves and screw it up even more. Um, and then there's like, I mean, there's a whole spectrum of people in between. So, um, with a lot of people, I remember there was one guy at my previous job, not at my current job, and he fell into the category of he knew just enough to be dangerous, where like he would hear stuff online or he would watch YouTube videos and he would try it. And oftentimes he ended up just screwing it up even more. And it's like, why didn't you just tell us in the beginning that you had this issue instead of trying to like we appreciate you taking the initiative, but we also know that you don't really know what you're doing. So with some people it's just a challenge to kind of like just help them realize when they're a little bit in over their head, and instead of like maybe I can fix it, just be like, okay, look, I messed up, these are all the things that I did, so that way at least we as the admin know like how to fix it. A lot of times when we start to work on it, we see, well, was this like this before, did you do this, like, oh yeah, I didn't mention that. It's like, well, that would have been helpful 3 hours ago when I started working on this. So and then you have the type where they kind of know like, okay, this isn't right, let me take it to the professionals in a sense. And then they also will actually want to know like how to fix it in case the issue happens again. So, and those are the probably the easiest ones to work with, because they they want to help our job. They want to help it be easier. What am I trying to say? They want it to be easier for us so they can fix the issue themselves if it's something that's very straightforward. Or if it's complex and they know that they can come back to us. So,
Yeah, that's you covered a lot of different things there, and one thing popped into my head while you were talking that really resonated. There was a personality that would always say things are broken that I worked with in the past, and sometimes not be fully forthcoming about what was broken or why it was broken. And I recall this scenario where this person was really upset that her laptop wasn't working, and as it turned out, she spilled a Coke on it earlier in the day, and it drowned in acid and sugar. So things were going south on that laptop.
right.
But just coming to us and telling us, hey, I spilled Coke on it so that we could move quicker would have been helpful,
Yeah.
versus us looking at it and going, well, clearly this has got liquid damage.
Yeah. Yeah.
Nathan, how
Just
about
tell
you?
me.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, just
with what
tell me.
James was I think what James was saying makes a lot of sense. I think that we often over time start to generalize, like group people into, how we think they're going to respond or how easy they're going to be able to work with, sometimes based upon their position or things like that. Like traditionally, like I found that doctors were very difficult to work with, because they don't like people telling them what to do. They think they know already. Um, but I think that comes down to, like, you can't just buy into those preconceived notions. Like, and this is easier or tougher depending on the size of your organization. But I think if you can really get to know the end users on a one-on-one individual basis, like you can start to suss out like what their comfort level is, like how much you can trust them to do things, as opposed to if they just need a little bit of guidance and they're good, or you need to kind of tell them, really tap the brakes on their, ideas and like, let us take care of it because that's what we're here for, sort of thing. So I think
Right.
being able to kind of like figure that out on a one-on-one basis is really helpful.
Hey, I just had an idea. Maybe on onboarding, we should develop some sort of IT mental health curriculum where we're trying to say, look, IT challenges happen. It's not a personal attack. The device doesn't hate you. Just teasing. But
It's not
um,
personal.
so, we kind of covered some of this, but techniques for dealing with challenging people. There are those personalities that are really worked up when they're in the middle of a technical challenge and they just need to vent and get it off their chest before you can really dive in and get to the nuts and bolts. So
Yeah.
what does that look like and feel for you guys? Do you have techniques that work well there for you to stay calm and not escalate the feel of that problem?
Yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead, Nathan.
Oh, I was just going to say, yeah, I think some of this has to deal with that rapport that you build up with your end users. Like if you've worked with them for a while and you can kind of establish that trust where they like know that you're, there to help them, that you're going to do everything you can, that you're going to be honest with them, I think that can go a long way. So then like letting them vent that frustration, get that initial like brunt of stuff taken care of, and then you can kind of get down into the nuts and bolts of actually what the issue is and how to fix it. I think allowing them to have that time to vent and kind of calm down really goes a long ways towards like productive communication after that.
Great.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Uh,
There was this, I was actually reminded of one, oh, sorry, go ahead. Okay.
no, go ahead, Jim.
I was reminded of one person that I dealt with that he was known to have a really bad temper. And I remember he called once and he was like screaming on the phone. And then he slammed it down. And then it was one of those where like honestly it's like I don't even want to deal with this guy, but I was the only one around, so like I'll go talk to him. And then I go in there and he's like just like upset and he's like yelling. And then I feel like you kind of have to, I know we're there like to provide a service to them, but at the same time we do need to be respected. So I remember telling him, I was like, okay, if you want to vent, that's fine, but you can't come at me like that. Um, so I said, I'll come back when you calm down. When you're ready, we'll continue, you know? Because it's like I know what the problem is. I know that it's simple. I can just fix it. But if you're going to be acting this way, then I'm not going to deal with that. I mean, just because you still need to respect me as an equal. So that was one thing. And he didn't do it. He vented his frustration before coming to me in the future. So and
Good
I
job.
also like, I mean, I cleared that with like I told my supervisor at the time as well. I was like, this guy's like just gone nuts. It's like he just needs to chill out. It's something very simple. So,
Hey, I
but yeah,
think
I do agree. Like, we also need to remember, like, even though we're dealing with these people, we are skilled in our areas and they're skilled in other areas. Like, we're both people. And I've also been on the receiving end where, like, we're all call customer service and then they'll tell me to do something simple. And it's like, man, is this how I make people feel when I tell them, have you tried turning it off and on? So yeah, it's just one of those
yeah,
things where we have to be mindful of like where they're coming from and why they're frustrated. It's like, okay, I can understand where you're coming from. I identify with you. So,
that's it. Well, we'll move on to the next slide after the phone slammer. uh, how do you navigate between end user requests and relationships? You know, that's part of that building your internal brand, building that relationship so that you know people feel comfortable to come to you with their problems, and that relationship can really help with maintaining high levels of service and building that solid foundation. So I always, when I was in the office, felt it was nice because you could walk through and people would stop and you'd have friendly chat, and that's part of building that core relationship and brand. So um, Nathan, why don't you talk a little bit about that and maintaining a high level of service?
Yeah, so for me, this all starts with onboarding. Like I get to be one of the first individuals from our organization that meets a new hire, right? So I've got an opportunity to kind of set the pace and like how the mood, the tone of how like IT deals with the organization and its end users. So I really like to try and establish that open dialogue. I think that's important, as well as an understanding of what they are comfortable with, what systems they've worked with before, and how I can support them, because it's all, in my mind, about supporting the end users, right? At the end of the day, like you were saying earlier. Um, so I think that really gets you started off on the right foot, and then bringing a positive attitude anytime that I interact with people is what I strive for, right? Because while they may be frustrated, we have to deal with people sometimes in their worst moments when, you know, they're trying to get something done and something
Right.
just crashed. They're stressed out. If you can at least bring a positive attitude, how can I help you? Like James was saying before, I understand your frustration. That helps bridge that gap. And just being consistent in that over time really helps establish that foundation where they trust you.
James, what do you
Right.
do to build a solid foundation to, bridge that gap between requests and relationships?
Well, usually when I interact with them, excuse me, usually in interacting with them, especially now that we're all kind of remote, um, it's really just asking about them. Like maybe we're waiting for something to install, and then I'll ask them, like, do you have any kids or anything like that? And just like Nathan said with onboarding, we have a unique opportunity to be like one of the first people that they meet at the company. So it's kind of cool to like establish that relationship and know that we care about you as a person and not just the work that you're doing for the company. And you hear a lot of interesting people. Like one of the questions that I always ask new people is like, okay, how did you find this company or what were you doing before then? And there was a guy that we actually were members of the same alumni. We went to the same university. There was someone that joined recently that used to be an actress, and I'm like, how did you go from an actress to this? So it's just interesting, like hearing people's story and their journey and like everything that's happened in their life to bring them to this point. So, and I feel like even just connecting on that level, or like there's like other people in our organization that have young kids. Like I have two kids, a 6-year-old and a 2-year-old, and like sometimes they're like awesome and they're angels, and other times they drive me crazy. And we'll like identify. It's like, oh, my kid's doing this too. What did you do? So like a lot of like on topic stuff just is like kind of a breather from like the regular like ebb and flow of work. And also you just make that connection with people so that the next time when they have to deal with you, it's like you kind of catch up on like personal things and also just stuff with work. So that's kind
Yeah.
of what has helped, and that's what helped me.
Yeah, I think that's a perfect segue moving into the next section. Um, this sort of bringing a human element to IT is really important, and you guys touched on some stuff there that's extremely important now, because you're really the first touch point an end user has on onboarding, and that's a great opportunity to start building that trust. We have a question here: what techniques are you using? um, what techniques are you using to build this trust in a remote work environment? And so, we're talking about hybrid work here. Some of that means that you have remote workers. So I think that leads right into it. It's really, really, really strong to mention that stuff. So how has hybrid work affected your end user reactions, workload, changing the way you interact, blurring lines between online, offline hours? So Nathan, why don't you talk about how workload has affected your or hybrid work mode has affected your day to day?
So we're actually just kind of transitioning now into more of a hybrid work. We're 100% remote up until this point through the pandemic so far. We did just open up an office and we're working and allowing people to come back in. I think one of the nice things is it's not a forced thing. We're allowing people to utilize it if they want to. And I think policies like that, where we can provide resources without mandating, kind of help ease that transition. But yeah, the workload is difficult, especially when you're at home. I'm in my home office, and it's very easy to, be working till 6, 7, 8 at night because you get focused on something, right? So it's hard to sometimes pull yourself away, but I found that getting out of the room that I'm in, shutting this computer down and doing other things is really vital. So I end up like not working on other things in here, trying to separate that out has been very helpful. And as far as interacting with end users, yeah, it's a challenge because it's all virtual at this point. Um, and I think to kind of what James was saying, that small talk, like we don't get that kind of water cooler conversation as naturally anymore. So it
Right.
takes a little bit more effort to like reach out and like whether it's on Slack or whatever, checking in with people, just kind of chatting, seeing how they're doing, what's new with them, and I think that goes a long way.
Yeah, that's you brought up something that I think is really important to talk about. It's, air gapping your environment, right? Making a space that you don't work in so it's home if you're in that remote work scenario. Um, James, how do you maintain a healthy workload? Even during business hours, if you're working remote, do you set time in the day where you step away from the computer, you go outside and you move around, just like you might do in the office and bump into someone and chat? How do you weave that into your daily work environment, whether you're in the office or out of the office?
Well, we're also 100% remote since the pandemic started. Although we have reopened our office for people to go in if they want to, only a handful have actually been going. So there are times where like I'll go to the office to work even because like I need to meet a new hire or I need to, meet up with somebody that broke something. Um, but as far as like managing the workload, it is very easy, like Nathan was saying, to just be focused and just to like keep going. Um, as far as breaks throughout the day, sometimes I'll work outside when the weather's nice. I know that that's probably a luxury of being in South Florida. Um, and sometimes I'll get up and get a snack or things like that. I mean, just things we've kind of gotten used to doing. Things become more challenging later in the day once my kids come home from school and then my wife comes home from work. Then it gets a little bit more challenging because there's more interruptions, there's questions about homework, and sometimes during those parts of the day, I'll try to do stuff that's kind of like you're on autopilot, so that when the concentration is broken, it's not as frustrating, I guess.
Yeah.
So it's a very different way of working. Whereas before, like when you're in an office environment, you kind of have like the background noise of people working, or you hear people leaving. It's like, oh, it's time for me to go. Let me wrap up. So it's just a different kind of way of doing things.
Yeah, it's that's great information, and it's interesting, what different people do to maintain a healthy balance. I'm 100% remote right now, and we're starting to open back up the offices so people can come in, and I think I do want to come in from time to time, just to be around my work family, but I'm starting to get a little better. I was doing back to back to back, and now I'm starting to get a little better about putting some blocks of time where I will respect that time and take care of me and get up and go move around, maybe go outside, get some fresh air, and then come back in 10, 15 minutes and get back at it. And
Hmm.
take some discipline, but we're IT people, it's always been that kind of always on job, but we're humans first.
Right. And
Definitely.
the watch is good at telling me to get up.
Yeah, that's good. That's a good thing. I think we can go to the next slide, Dor. How do you enable and manage hybrid or remote work? Yeah, this is a this is a really good one. Uh, Creating a better end user experience. What platforms are used or tools? Too many or too few platforms or apps? App sprawl is absolutely a thing. Or how have you used automation? James, why don't you talk about creating a better end user experience? What have you done during during this chaos of we're going all remote? What did you do to impact a better user experience for that?
There were a few things that we did. One challenge that we had was when we were in the office, we were on Active Directory. And once we were all remote, we didn't really have we didn't really have everything set, our infrastructure set up for being separated from Active Directory for extended periods of time. So that means policies weren't getting pushed out. That means passwords weren't being changed on a regular basis, which was a challenge that we had to address pretty quickly once we realized those things were happening. And this, I know this is a JumpCloud webinar. This isn't necessarily a plug for JumpCloud, but it helped us a lot because we saw this kind of coming and we started looking at different solutions. And once we rolled that out, we were able to kind of nip that in the bud relatively quickly, along with the other features that it included, which has helped us with kind of automating certain things and replicating a lot of the things that we had on Active Directory. We had to learn a different way of doing them with JumpCloud, but that definitely did help us out. And it's kind of convenient that this is a webinar with JumpCloud, but it was a big help, not gonna lie.
No, I think that's absolutely spot on. You know, the initial impact when everybody went remote, I myself was working at an MSP, and you know, there were some clients that weren't really prepared to do this. They didn't have a remote work strategy, and you know, the solution was, well, let's send desktops home and they can, you know, remote desktop to a server or VPN, and that had its own challenges because home networks aren't office networks.
Right. Yeah, we
um,
were fortunate in that our entire workforce has laptops, so it was easy for them to just go home. But
yeah.
the other challenges remain. So
Nathan, you know, how did you address this? And you know, are you looking at automation, and what are you doing about app sprawl?
Yeah, so we were in a good place when the pandemic hit and we had to go 100% remote. We were already a JumpCloud customer at that point. We all had laptops and mobile devices, so we were able to transition essentially overnight, and it was very seamless. It worked great. And we've continued to leverage different aspects of JumpCloud for single sign-on, things like that, to try and help consolidate and make things easier for our end users with reducing the number of accounts and passwords needed. So that's been very helpful. From an IT perspective, I've been doing a lot of deploying of software through JumpCloud, which helps initially with the deployment to machines, but also in supporting them. If somebody needs a license of something, I can push, you know, Office to their machine and it'll install, no big deal. That's really helped take a lot of the weight off of my shoulders in supporting people who are never connected, right? And that connection is potentially problematic. For instance, we had one user that was having lots of issues, and finally I learned that she was getting her Wi-Fi beamed across a lake, and it was just junk internet, right? So there's things like that there's no way around it, right? You have to have your end users having at least decent internet. If they have that, like, you're pretty much golden, right? You can do
yeah,
whatever you need to do at this point. And yeah, automation is a big part of that. And we're working towards more and more of that, just because I, as like a single IT department of one, I don't have time for everything. So the more I can automate things, whether that's through the deployment process or supporting end users, it just takes a load off of my shoulders.
hmm
Absolutely. Great stuff. I think we covered a lot of really good stuff there. We'll move on to the next slide. Yeah, balance, satisfaction, and building relationships. You know, this kind of comes back. There was a question here earlier. So, do you find that making small talk helps mitigate stress of end users? We touched on that. That's building relationships, obviously. You know, and that opportunity on onboarding, I think it starts there. And once you have that, then you can have healthy dialogue, and maybe you avoid the phone slammer scenario down the road. I've seen some unhealthy behavior, and you know, over time in my IT career, I got better at building relationships, and I think it goes a long way. How do you create a balance and stay focused, you know, between end user reactions and long-term projects? This is a really good one. You know, it can be difficult when you're in project mode. You know, we can talk about projects that you had to rush out the door at the beginning of the pandemic, and balancing that with the day-to-day needs of your workforce can be tricky. And one of the things that I want to talk about is when you're in project mode, do you guys look for external resources? So that's a really, sometimes that's a delicate conversation, right? Because that means budget impact, it means approval. Let's talk in depth about that, how you guys maintain that balance in project mode.
James, you
Nathan, do
want
you
to
want to
take
kick
this,
off?
or
Um, doesn't matter. I could touch on it.
Who wants to go?
Yeah, it's always interesting. So like we set like quarterly goals that we have to meet. And a lot of times we have these goals, but then we'll have a influx of new hires coming in, or we'll have just something else that ends up taking priority. And it's always an interesting juggling act. I know that I haven't, honestly, I haven't been great in doing that, because a lot of times what will happen is during the day I'm dealing with the end users because that's when they're working. And then probably later on at night I'll sneak back on and work a little bit more, which honestly, I don't like to do that, but sometimes it's like, well, I need to get this stuff done in order to like meet those goals, and also um, just kind of try and balance the two things. So it's something that I'm still like trying to work on, honestly. Um, and there are other times where I'll look to see a request that comes in, and then I just have to prioritize and be like, okay, this isn't a big deal. I can get to this later. Or like Nathan said, he's a team of one. I'm a team of two. I have myself and one other guy that works in a different country, because we have our office in South Florida, then we have another office in South America, and the other person's down there. So a lot of times it's just like us having each other's back. We'll be working on different aspects of the project. We're also balancing um, handling requests and also prioritizing. Other techniques that I've used has just been like putting blockers on the calendar, or setting myself as away, just hoping that people take the hint. And usually the insistent ones still find a way to get in contact. And also, oftentimes, I'll look at the request, and if it's something quick, then it's like, okay, well, I can knock this out real quick. It's the low-hanging fruit, so to speak. So it's like, let me just get in there, knock this out. Oh, they need an admin password typed in. Let me remote and type it in and let them go on their way. So, because I also don't want to have people like just waiting when it's something that I could do in 5 minutes. So it's an interesting challenge that I don't know if it's something that you ever arrive to, but it's something that you always strive for.
Yeah, it's that there's a lot of great points there. I can talk a little bit to when I was rolling out JumpCloud for the first time, and I tested it. I was very comfortable with where we were going, but it was my first rollout. And as you guys know, in a forklift migration, going from one platform to another, there you always have to buffer for the unknown. And so I kind of planned for that, and I did bring in some external resources, 2 extra guys to help me and my SE do the rollout. And my plan was that it would be a Friday evening, till Sunday afternoon. And ultimately, it went way better than that. We were done, Saturday at noonish, so I took everybody to lunch. But it could have gone a different way, and I allowed for that buffer, and I also made sure that I had additional resources in case I needed that. Um, and that's really just about communicating with your team and letting them know this is a technical project. This is the first time we've done something like this. I may need additional resources to maintain that high level of support you get on the day-to-day basis. We should consider bringing in additional resources. And generally, I think when you have that conversation, leadership understands it. They want the best possible outcome. They've already, bought into the project. And generally, I see, if you're setting expectations, you'll get the support you need from leadership. Nathan, what's your feeling on this stuff?
I agree with a lot of what both of you have said. It's same in my boat, right? I think to elaborate on one of the things that James said is when you have something easy, air quotes, come in that you can take care of quickly, that's something that I tend to do and is important to me, partially because for me, like if I end up having more than 10 tickets active at a time, it starts to feel overwhelming, right? So it's partially for my own benefit to just take care of that, get it through the system and done, but it's also for the end user. Like James was saying, like, does it make sense for me to just put something off because it's not super critical, but it's still impacting an end user? So if I can take care of it quickly,
Right.
keep their satisfaction higher, I think there's a benefit that's not always recognized in that, because sometimes you weigh that against focus time for a bigger project, right? And you're like, well, you should have been focusing on this, or I wanted to focus on this, but there's a value to like popping over and taking care of stuff quickly, even if it slightly disrupts like that focus time. So that's something that I really try and do. And I think it overall it helps everyone. Like to an extent, like if that gets too much, yeah, it breaks up your focus and the project can drag on. But like that's where blocking out time on my calendar is a big thing that I do. And
Mm.
oftentimes those things will shift throughout the day depending on how priorities change or what things pop up. But I think the like physical act of putting it on my calendar helps me like prioritize and like understand how much time I have in the day to do different things. So that's been very helpful for me. And then I think kind of what you were saying, Zach, with like talking honestly with leadership when you need something, you know, it's great. I think in IT, we often get the kind of feeling that we can do tons of things with not a lot of resources, and that's generally true. But I think speaking up when you actually legitimately need those resources is important. And if you have a track history of turning over projects, doing the good work, they're more likely from a leadership budgetary standpoint to give you the things that you need.
Yeah, that's a
Right.
great point, Nathan. I mean, that goes back to building your brand and being trusted. So that happens early on in your tenure at an organization. You build and you build, and that brand affects, you know, the willingness of the users to come to you. It affects the leadership's trust in you and what you can ask of them. And I think it's that two-way street, working at that trust and giving that trust.
That actually reminds me of a just during the pandemic, we changed our phone systems and we also moved to JumpCloud, as I mentioned before, from Active Directory, but while being remote. And it's just like, how are we going to do this with all of our users all over the place? And also, just to add to what Nathan was saying, a lot of it also comes with setting like realistic expectations. So I think a lot of times what happens is also like you were saying, Zach, like when you're testing something and everything goes according to plan, it's like, okay, well, this in reality should only take me like 5 or 10 minutes to do, you know? So then, and sometimes we can be naive and go to our leadership and say, oh, well, this is the best case scenario time frame, but it's never best case scenario when we're dealing with this technology. So one thing that has helped me is just to give like a more realistic time frame and to include time to mess up and include time to say, oh, there was a better way for me to be doing this all this time. So it's just being
Yeah,
better at
guys.
estimating time.
That's great stuff. Yeah, I mean, estimating time, that's a big part of project planning, but there can be wrenches thrown at you that you can't expect. I was doing a cloud migration from an on-prem exchange to a cloud-hosted exchange with Intermedia back in 2010, and right in the middle of moving my PSTs up to it, power went out for 4 hours.
Ah,
And that's
man.
kind of non-negotiable. I need power, and I did have UPS, substantial UPS, but not 4 hours. So look, we got an interesting question that goes back to something we were talking about earlier. What platforms are you guys using for ticket submissions, communications? You know, this person finds that in their company they wish they had less channels or apps for communication with end users because it's something that it becomes hard to track and overwhelming. So yeah, unifying on a communication platform. I mean, look at us. We've got Google Chat, or you got Teams, or you got Slack and Zoom. So there's communication that can happen everywhere, but that's not usually conducive for us in ticketing. So yeah, let's talk about that.
So we're using Fresh Service internally. That's been a great platform for us because one, the ticket management is just robust. Like there's a lot of options, a lot of capabilities, automation that can be built into that. So it's been really helpful. But it also comes with some additional things. Part of that is like the solutions or like knowledge base component, which I find very valuable because it allows me to create knowledge base articles for common occurring problems that come up or questions, and I can provide kind of self-service capabilities to my end users. Here's how you go and fix that, right? So they don't necessarily have to ask me to get the information needed. But regardless of how anybody brings a question to me, like we require a ticket. Like that's kind of a hard set rule because that's like the one place of truth where we get to track the flow of that ticket through resolution. And it also provides capabilities for them to, after the fact, you know, rate or provide a satisfaction survey, right? Which is important to like get that feedback so that we can always try and do better.
Yeah, yeah, that's slick. I like the integration of building a KB knowledge base. That's pretty slick. And you know what? I was going to ask you this, but what was that platform you used for ticketing again? We do have a question here asking for that.
Yeah, it's Fresh Service. And that's from Freshworks. They've got a couple different platforms depending upon your needs. So they've got a lot of stuff out there.
James, what are you doing to address communication sprawl, app sprawl there?
Yeah, we're we're a Google shop here, so most people will like just use Google Chat to message us. We have access to Zoom. We have with our phone system, there's like a texting component in there as well, but most people just end up using Google Chat. As far as requests and things are concerned, most people use they put in a ticket, and we're using Zendesk here internally and externally. We've kind of standardized on that, and then our IT team actually will use, I don't know what it's called now. It used to be called version 1. Um, but and I think they changed their names. I'm not sure what it's called now. But yeah, as far as requests to come to myself and my team, we're all using Zendesk, which we started actually using about, at least for internal purposes, about maybe a year or 2 years ago, because before that we were on another open source project that worked well for a long time. But Zendesk has a lot of automations into it. You can put in SLAs and things like that. So if I don't respond to something, it'll start nagging me and nagging my team and things like that. So that's one thing that's been helpful. Um, and also we have people that'll like chat like, oh, this might be quick. So then sometimes I'll just do it real quick, but then say we need to have this documented anyway. So put in a ticket and I'll go in there and say it's resolved and things like that. So we're a
Yeah,
little bit flexible. There's
glad
some
you touched
people that
on
are,
that.
yeah.
Yeah, because it seems like yeah, the scenario here is get it documented, take care of it quickly. Sounds like you guys got good tools for that. Where do you find satisfaction and positivity in the role, in the job? You know, there's the positives of collaborating with end users, helping them with their issues, and motivation to complete tasks and help end users. I know for me, it's just sort of built in. I like helping people and I like helping them through a challenge. I think that sometimes that should be core to the nature of someone in IT. And so, you know, when you look at the big picture of workloads and a team moving towards something, and if somebody's stumbling and you can help pick them up so that the team can hit those goals and those milestones, it's a big deal. It's a big part of how a company achieves success. We play a critical role in that. So Nathan, what's your favorite part about being in IT? What makes you happy?
I think it's the constant challenge is core to it, right? I like learning new things, and I like working through problems. There are opportunities to shine, right? I have the ability to have a very large impact on our organization. And if I can do that in a way that they don't realize that I'm doing it because it's so seamless and it doesn't impact people, like that's my goal. And I'm generally pretty successful at that, and that makes me very happy. But it's always trying to do better. I don't want to like rest on my laurels and like just call it a day and this is good. Like there's always more that we can be doing. And I like that cadence of like, all right, I solved this. That was great. Let's get on to the next thing.
Yeah, we agree with you at JumpCloud. We call it 1% better every day. So wake up, think about how you can be better in your role, and certainly achieving your own goals is also helpful to feeling good and having satisfaction. James, where do you find shine in the day to day?
There's a couple things. One thing is just working with different people that have different strengths and just recognizing, okay, you guys, you're gifted in that. So I'm not going to try and reinvent the wheel. I'm going to share that task with you and then let you work to your strengths, let me work to my strengths, and then together we build like a better product. Um, so that's one piece of it. Another piece of it is, like Nathan said, I really do enjoy like number one, solving the problems, and number two, making things more efficient. Just because since we're in this space, we may hear about things like a long time before somebody else may hear about it. So just going to like a department and then they're having this issue or there's this process that's inefficient. And I'm like, oh, I read about this. This could be done so much better. Like, or like, I'm like, why are you doing it this way? Like for so long, you know? And then being able to say, okay, well, look, these people really need this product because it just will make their workload so much better and smoother and more efficient. And then being able to like see that from just the concept to through the execution, just like saying, okay, look, this is something that will really help them out. And then seeing how their lives and their work days are better because of something that you touched on and like kind of help other people to see the value in that instead of just saying, oh, we want to spend money on a new piece of software. Like, well, these are the reasons why. This is a justification.
Yeah,
So being able to kind of see that happen and now see like, oh, this is so much better. Thanks for pushing that through. It's like that kind of thing I think is awesome because it's like our whole job is to make the technology invisible. Like if somebody never contacts us because something's breaking, that means the technology is doing its job and we're doing our job to support it. So as long as that's happening, I think that's great.
absolutely, absolutely. We're going to skip the next slide because we've got a bunch of questions, and I think that's going to be fun to get to. So we can move forward. So yeah, this is our resources slide. Everyone, take a look at what we have here. There's the IT hour. You guys can go register with that and, talk amongst other IT professionals. The JumpCloud Lounge is a fantastic place to communicate and learn about other strategy and how people are implementing things, get new information about products and stuff like that are coming. Our blog always chocked full of great information that's coming up, product releases and stuff like that. And lastly, more webinars. Please join them. Let's build this community and learn from each other. So we'll get right to some questions here. First question, how do you manage work from home equipment, monitors, printers, etc.? Do you think it's best to provide these things to work from home employees, or do you let them purchase on their own? I too am a one-person IT team right now, and I can see it being an inventory nightmare trying to manage these things, devices in the office and homes. Yeah, that's a really good question, right? Inventory management. Sometimes it might be easier just to let someone run out to Best Buy and buy something, but is it what is really best for that user? And yeah, how do you guys deal with that? James, do you want to kick off?
Sure. So what we do Well, we give everyone a laptop, like I mentioned earlier. And then a lot of people already have a home office set up. So one of the questions that I ask them is there anything else that you need, or are you good with just a laptop? And with most of those people, or with the people that say, okay, they need a monitor, they need a keyboard, mouse, they need a docking station, we'll provide that, and then we have it documented. So that way, if they ever leave the company, then we have a record of everything that they need to turn back into the company. Obviously, the laptop is the highest value item. So once we get that, we're good. But yeah, we do require them to like bring back all their other stuff if they ever leave the company. It is a challenge. I'm sure the way that we're doing it may not be the most efficient way. It's something that we probably need to get back to. But we basically just have a form that they fill out and it dumps it into a spreadsheet. So we can just run queries against that and see what each user has. And it can be challenging, I'm not gonna lie. But but yeah, that's currently how we're doing it.
Nathan,
Yep.
what are you guys doing to track inventory? I mean, this does come right down to the finance department at the end of the day, and it's part of doing taxes and knowing what you have. And yeah, how does this look in your environment?
Yeah, I think we do something somewhat similar. So when we have a new hire, before they've even started, I reach out to them and I let them know we've got a standard bundle of equipment that we provide our users. And so I document what that is. And I actually ask them, like, does this sound good? We want to make sure you have everything you have, or do you not need this? Because, like James was saying, some people already have home offices set up, right? We definitely provide the laptop. If they need an iPad, we provide that for sure. But other stuff, if they've got a great big monitor that they want to use and a mouse and keyboard that they like, we're perfectly happy to let them do that. And for the people that do accept the equipment that we provide, yeah, we just kind of track that, indicate that. Even having that initial email correspondence helps provide that documentation of like, yes, they wanted this and this, but they didn't want this, that we can always go back and reference that.
Right.
Um, and then, if an employee leaves the company, then we do expect that equipment back. And one of the ways that we manage that is, we've got a company FedEx account. So we will provide them like the account information and say, just take it to FedEx, let them box it all up and send it back on us, right? So we try and make it as easy as possible.
Yeah, we do the same thing. We had one person that like put the laptop in like an Amazon box with like a couple of those air pillow things, and we get it and like the laptop's all banged up. It's like I just gave you this laptop like a month ago. It's like why would
Yeah,
you ship it back like that?
we used to do that as well. Like, yeah, just box things up and send it back. And yeah, we got a couple that were just destroyed. So
Yeah,
we,
like go to FedEx, let them do everything so that we can file a claim and get money from FedEx if it's
exactly.
damaging shipping. Yeah,
Sometimes spending a few bucks is the cheapest way.
exactly.
We got another question here. This is a great one too. How do you manage multiple high priority tickets? This is especially tricky in, small IT orgs. So yeah, guys, this is perfect, right up our alley. James, you got the last one first. Nathan,
I use a coin flip app. No, I'm joking. I don't.
that's a great idea. I like that.
Um, it it takes understanding like the organization and the people who are working in it. Like you might get multiple high priority things, but because like how one ticket is going to impact things, if it's got a wider impact versus one individual, like that can help suss out like which thing do I actually work on first. And then the important part of that is to communicate with both, people submitting those requests so that they understand, right? Like, hey, I have to go work on problem A, but person who submitted problem B, I'm going to be getting to you as soon as possible. Like your request was received, like it will be okay. And then that gives them the opportunity to say like, hey, if this gets worse or like the problem spreads, let me know, and I might be able to reprioritize.
Beautiful. James?
Yeah, I don't think I have anything to add to that. I think actually the only thing that I probably would add is some people mark things as high priority that aren't. Like my mouse stopped working. It's like it's a wireless mouse, check the batteries, or use a trackpad in your laptop until I get to you, that kind of thing. So sometimes one thing that we have to take into account is one person that might mark something as high priority will look at it and it's like, is this really high priority? Like I understand it's important to you, but you understand that I'm a 1 or 2 person team. So like Nathan said, you communicate and say, I'll get to you. And in the meantime, you could try a couple of things. But let me finish this and then I'll come to you. So
I think one of the things that we do as well is like we help define like what those priorities mean so that we kind of have some guidelines. So if somebody does put in a high priority ticket for a mouse, you literally have something that a policy sort of that you can go back to that says this isn't actually high priority, right?
right.
I think it helps having a little bit of guidance or documentation like spelled out around that so that you can reference it.
I think those are great suggestions there. We have another good question, and I personally have faced this one. So, how do you manage one-off power users where their job function requires vastly different hardware or software or operating system from the norm that you would roll out? James, do you want to kick this one off?
Sure. Let's see. I'm just trying to think of an example of someone that I have that fits this. Nathan, why don't you go for a second while I think
Yeah,
about
I can
this?
jump in actually. So we have some distinct examples of this. So for instance, we have one Linux user, our cloud engineer, and so we've provided him with a System 76 laptop, and he is kind of on the hook for managing that. Like I work with him on that. Like you've got to have it connected to JumpCloud. We've got to have, these key components installed on it so that we have insight into that machine. But because he has the expertise on that, whereas I don't, like we kind of push a lot of that administration and management to him. And so like we've developed that relationship and it works well.
Interesting. So more of an
Right.
IT partnership on that one-off need. Okay.
Yeah, I would say that it's the same in my instance. And once you said that, it all clicked for me because we have maybe 2 or 3 people that are using Linux. They're all on our development team, and it's the same thing. It's like I don't know anything about it, so here you go, have fun. Just these are our requirements. Make sure that you're meeting them. So yeah.
We got one more. This goes back to the one of the questions. Which tool do you use to keep inventory of users' equipment? Sounds like yours is a spreadsheet, James, right?
It's kind of a mix. As far as what stuff is checked out, yeah, we do have a spreadsheet for that, but we have an inventory tool. I think it's called Snipe It,
I
which I believe is open source, but that's that's where we have like all of our stuff. So
got it. Okay. Nathan, do you have an inventory management tool that you like?
Yeah, so partially we leverage JumpCloud for that because we've got the agent installed on all the machines. And then we have a separate MDM system that we use for managing our iPads. So that has all of those devices tracked. Fresh Service, the tool that I use for our IT service management, that also has an inventory component to it. And what's nice about a lot of these is that they'll also be able to pick up software that's installed, which is a big component of it as well. When it comes to like the mice and keyboards and monitors, we have kind of insight. We don't have a sole like centralized place where we track that. But we did at one point, like when everybody went home, we allowed them to take equipment home with them. And we used like a Google form to like collect that information at that time.
right.
Guys, this has been really great. We had some fantastic interaction from the audience. Great questions. You guys were fantastic. I appreciate your time. And thank you to all the guests that joined. Remember the resources. We'll see you on the next one.
Bye, guys.
Yeah.
Please subscribe and check out more content from us.